If you're a custom home builder, the fact that it's a Moen faucet or a Dell or whatever it is matters to the client. And so that needs to stay. But if you were remodeling an apartment complex, the clients don't care if it's a Moen faucet. They care that it works and that it looks good. You really want to have those details nailed down before you reach out to these factories.
If you're operating a piece of real estate today, you're going to want to listen to our guest in this interview. He is going to help you to source materials for your remodels so much cheaper. And that's the name of the game, right? Where can we save capital so ultimately our investors can make more return on these projects? Our guest today is Nate Slade. He's the CEO of InterSource, and he helps builders and franchises and developers save 15 to 30% on just construction and franchise materials by sourcing directly from factories. He's got many years of experience, and I mean, he's done many things that you are going to hear about that have helped him to get to this point where he's going to help you to save drastically. This is your real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell, and welcome to our interview with Nate Slade. Nate, welcome to the show. You have a skill set that, or a business ultimately that could help so many of our guests. I'm looking forward to diving in on that today and why and how and all these questions that I'm sure you get all the time from your clients. But before we do that, speak to your journey. I know it's construction to river guiding to, and now global sourcing, which I know could help so many of our listeners. But give us a little bit, some more detail there.
Probably a good way to put it is in my earlier years, I had occupational ADD. I really didn't know what I wanted to be when I grow up. I had the opportunity to be a whitewater river guide right out of, through college. That's what I did through the summer months. And it was a blast. Just loved being in the wild with people that had never really experienced that before. And I think that was what it was, is like helping them open their eyes to what's possible. I had several people be like, they had never seen stars like that in their entire life. And they were adults and they just, they grew up in a major metro and they just didn't have that opportunity. So it was cool to do that. And then the younger kids, just to see their experiences through that. And I think that kind of pre-framed me to do things that were scary, right? Because I didn't know if I had the skills to be a river guide. But when I did it, I realized you can learn those skills and it can impact the lives of a lot of people for good. So anyway, it was a lot of fun. But then that quickly morphed into, we were talking about a little bit before the show, into business. I had a pretty clear prompting that I needed to start going down the business route. And I didn't really know what it was. And I kind of latched on to a really small business. I was going to do windshield repair, and I was going to build it up like a summer sales thing that, a lot of college campuses are doing right now. And anyway, as I was going through that process, it made a lot of mistakes, lost a lot of money. And at first I was wondering why I was kind of guided down that route. But with time, I realized that the lessons I learned in that process would come back to me, and I would be, I guess, battle tested on a small scale so that I could make right choices on a bigger scale. So anyway, kind of bounced from that into construction and worked with my brother. He was flipping homes. This was back in 2012. So after the crash down in Phoenix, things are starting to come back. Flipping was going crazy. A lot of homes were being renovated. The numbers just worked. We did 75 homes in 18 months. So we were on a tear, and we were moving pretty quickly. And then all of a sudden, a Canadian hedge fund came in and bought up 1,500 homes in a weekend. It evaporated the inventory down there. And so we quickly pivoted to new construction and built several homes that way. And I was looking back over my life, and there were a lot of businesses that I had started that just didn't quite go. And I was trying to figure out why that was. And I found the common thread was marketing. I wasn't very good at marketing and getting my name out there. So I just did some networking, and I was like, who's the best in this valley at marketing? I'm going to go work for him. And a guy named by Joe Polish, his name kept popping up. I don't know if you've heard of Joe Polish before.
I have. Yes, I know of him.
So, and I didn't know that he was running a group called Genius Network. Everybody that referred him to me said that he was this good marketer. So anyway, I went into his office and was like, I know you don't have a job listing, and I don't even care if you pay me, but I want to work for you. Like, I need to learn this stuff. And he was cool and generous. And he's like, I don't have a job listing, but you're hired. So it was kind of funny. That interview was comical because he's like, so do you know what sales copy is? I was like, no. Do you know graphic design? No. Do you know how to build a website? No. Like, I had no skills. I was like, but what I do know is I can run teams, right? I've flipped all these homes, managed all these crews, and so I can get a lot of projects done that way. And so he hired me on as a project manager. And
we could do a whole interview right there just on what just happened. I mean, like, so many people come and ask me, how do I get started doing this? Or how do I, work for this person so I can gain experience? And like, you just went like, create a position for me right now. That's kind of what you did. So just speak into that just a second. It's like, wait a minute. I'm sure that was scary to go in there. Like, I don't have any marketing skills, but how can I come work for you? Well, how did you even get the time to ask him that question? He wasn't looking for anybody. He didn't have an open position. How did you even get yourself in the door? And then how did you display to him in a way, your abilities? So he was like, no, I got to have this guy work for me.
I just walked in to his office, and I think I got lucky because he was there that day. He's usually traveling quite a bit, but and then I spoke to his CEO first, who was Dan Cashel, and really he did a good job. He's like, whoa, it's not too often that we get people that just come in. And I was willing, it wasn't like a bluff. It wasn't like, I'm going to say that I'll work for free and hope that they pay me. I was totally committed to that. And so I think he felt that. And it was rare. And so I think in his mind, he's like, we need this type of energy on the team. And so I think that was it, really. It's just, I was willing to do that. And then, of course, they were like, no, we're not going to make you work for free. It was kind of funny, though, because I didn't have those skills, but I did have project management skills. Mm-hmm. I came in at a higher position because I was more of a manager of all of those skill sets. And
interesting. Okay. I didn't mean to get too sidetracked there, but that's pretty impressive that you're willing to just go do that and walk in there and say, hey, I'm willing to work for free. Yeah. I tell so many people, hey, if you can do that, like with the right people, you're paying yourself so much. You found the marketing help and some, no doubt about it, then move on to where'd you go next? What happened, to get to where you're at now?
Yeah. So then I decided to go off on my own. And right then, that was 2015, Amazon was really gaining traction as far as this marketplace to sell products, physical products. And so I started fumbling around in that world, invested too much into a course that I had to apologize to my wife later, and got those skills to start importing different products. And at first it was just, I don't know if you remember this time, but like Amazon was trying to become the everything store back then. And so there were a lot of same products. So they're all just knockoffs, right? And so that's kind of the world that I was in right in the beginning. And it became clear really quickly that that was not sustainable. So then we started to actually invent our own products because we needed some way to separate ourselves from everybody else. And what that did is we couldn't just go on Alibaba, find a picture of the product that everybody else was selling and just sell that same thing. I had to dig deeper and find specialty factories and communicate with them at a much deeper level to create a custom made product. So that was kind of how we separated ourselves. And then that business did really well. And along the way, it kind of boomed. And we had a brother-in-law that owned a cabinet shop. And he was like, because he heard us talking about the margins, right? Like, well, we're getting it for this, we imported for this, and we're selling it for this. And he's like, can you take a look into cabinet hardware? Because it just seems like it's really overpriced. And so we did, and it was. And so we got some samples in, and sure enough, it was the exact same quality that he was putting in his stuff already. And it was just significantly cheaper. Like I think he was paying $5 a hinge, and we were able to sell it to him for $2 a hinge. It was just a massive impact on his business. When you think of $2, you're like, that's not that big a deal, but you're talking every single hinge, and then they're pumping these projects out like crazy. That was just kind of a quiet business that was operating in the background. for several years. And then we were able to sell our e-commerce brands. During COVID, there was a big boom, and we decided to just sell at the peak rather than having a tail off year. And then we were sitting there going, well, now what do we do? We've got time and all this experience. And we're like, well, we actually made a really big impact for this brother-in-law. What if we did that for more businesses? Businesses that are buying the exact same thing over and over again, and they just need high volumes on a consistent schedule. Looks like we can save them quite a bit of money. So we started going down that path, and sure enough, that was true. And all of our experience in the construction world just kind of married up really nicely. And so we were able to speak that language with the factory and with the clients. And so anyway, that's kind of how we got into what we're doing now.
I love how you have, I mean, you've been able to pivot a few times, but to grow, right? And, oh, something happens. I think like that ability to be able to, oh my goodness, what's happening? See it, and then say, we can shift and we can grow that much more now in this direction.
Yeah.
So many will stay in that space and just keep hoping, right? And then it just crashes, instead of being able to see, hey, we can pivot and still use these skills. And so let's dive in a little bit on how you're using these skills to really save and deliver quality, to clients, right? What does that look like? Who's your main customer right now? And talk about the scale that you're able to provide to these clients.
So we have 3 different client types. So the one would be a high volume flipper. Second would be like a production builder. If they're building 50 spec homes typically or more every year. And then multifamily is a really big section where they're either building ground up or they're buying maybe a little outdated property and they're looking to do a value add and to do some remodeling on, say, 100 to 200 units. That's kind of where we fit. And the reason that all 3 of those are actually very similar to each other is because we have to hit the scale, the minimum order quantities of the factory. The old supply chain is great, right? It provides a lot of value for a specific type of customer. So if you need immediacy and you need a lot of options, the old supply chain is great. But if you know your timeline, you're putting in the same stuff, and you're going through quite a bit of it, then let's shake that supply chain up. Let's change it. I mean, that's what Amazon did. It's the reason Amazon is so big. Is a typical supply chain. You've got the factory, then a big brand name, then you'll have an importer, and then a distributor, and then a retailer, and then the customer. So all these touch points are necessary to provide those 2 benefits of immediacy and options. But if you don't need those 2 benefits, you can actually cut out a majority of those middlemen and just push all those savings to the client. And that's essentially what we're doing. So we're trying to find people that are going through a lot of the same stuff, but then also brand is not a critical element, right? So if you're a custom home builder, the fact that it's a Moen faucet or a Dell or whatever it is matters to the client. And so that needs to stay. But if you were remodeling an apartment complex, the clients don't care if it's a Moen faucet. They care that it works and that it looks good. That's what the client cares. And then obviously the builder, they care that it saves them money and it checks those 2 boxes as well. So,
for example, in our business, if we're remodeling or if we buy a 200 unit apartment community and the plan is, let's say we're going to remodel half or 2/3, 100, 150 of those units, maybe all of them over a certain amount of time, speak to maybe the how that pipeline would work or the logistics of, okay, Nate, we're remodeling this many units, we're going to buy, 150 of this kind of faucet or, 150 of this set of cabinets or flooring or, what does that look like then to come to you and say, okay, we're ordering this amount of materials. How do we, from picking it out to ensuring we're getting quality stuff to getting it to us and actually using it? And I don't know, just help us to envision what that process looks like a little bit.
So I guess the first step is like picking out your stuff. Like, what do you want? Typically, these factories are making hundreds, if not thousands of options because it is the factory. So it's essentially like whatever we give them, when we say, hey, we need these specifications, they will build it exactly that way. So you really want to have those details nailed down before you reach out to these factories, right? So if you say, we'll just talk about flooring. If you're doing LVP, you need to know, is it 3 millimeter, 4.5, 5? Like the thickness matters, the wear layer, how durable of a wear layer, how thick is the pad underneath? Because if you just talk to the factories and say, hey, I need flooring, it's way too broad for them. And so as long as you know what you want to put in, and the best way to do that is actually just have a sample of what you've put in already. We like this. Let's just model this. Then we can use those details to work with the factory to get samples made. And that's essentially what it is for picking out all of your items, whether it's windows or cabinets or countertops. It's kind of the same process. Then I guess your next question was, how do you know you're dealing with a good factory? So there's actually a lot of ways to find good factories, but there's a lot of horror stories out there. So back with our e-commerce brand, we actually invented a trampoline accessory. It was a hose that attached to the safety netting of the trampoline, and it had holes all around it, so it would spray on the kids while they jumped. And so we were trying to make the trampoline fun and cool again. This was back when we were new and we didn't know. So we just reached out to Alibaba and we found this contact and we went through the whole process and we started making it, and it was taking forever. They were taking forever. They were pushing deadlines and we were so confused with what was going on. Finally, we fell on this idea like, hey, maybe we should send somebody to the factory and check it out. So we paid a company to go do that. This guy was operating, he was plugging into power and water in the back of a gas station without them knowing and using that to produce the product, right? So like,
Oh my goodness.
he was not a factory. He was right. It was just nothing. Now that we knew that, we obviously pivoted, found a different factory. And so that was a really cool learning experience that what you see online is not actually what's happening behind the scenes. So we go through quite the vetting process now. We send people to the factory. We actually have them chase the supply chain. So it's like they're getting plastic for this product, but where's the plastic coming from? So they'll chase that and find out, oh, they're getting it from these reputable factories. Now we'll research those factories and make sure they're legitimate. And so anyway, there's quite a process to make sure that this factory will make the quality that you need every single time. And one way that we do that is we can actually find the factories that are making the big name brands. Like there's our flooring is coming out of a Mohawk flooring factory in Vietnam. And so that's one way that you can shortcut a lot of that. You just know that they're already sending stuff in, or we can find most of the factories that import stuff for Home Depot, just because import of record, there's all these, there's documentation that shows where's this stuff going, where did it come from, like all those kind of details are out there if you know where to find them.
Can you maybe give us a real life example of, this apartment community, this many units, this is kind of the savings, or maybe the impact on the NOI or the valuation or something, to help paint more numbers to the listener of this is the kind of depth of savings that like ordering in this way could save them.
Yeah, definitely. So we just did a project in Birmingham, Alabama. It was about 218 units, I think is what we did. And their scope of work was the lighting package, plumbing, cabinet doors, and toilets. And for that build, the next nearest competitor to us was 500 grand, somewhere around there. And ours came in at about 280. And so pretty significant savings, between 30 and 40%. The only snag was that they had to wait a little longer for it. The higher price quote, they could have had stuff sooner. And that's what I was going to speak to. When you are ordering direct, since it's coming from other part of the world, anticipate about 100 days from placing the order to having it in hand. But if you know your cash flow cycle and your renovation schedule, and 100 days is not that big of a deal, because a lot of multifamily guys, their plan is to do it over 2 or 3 years. They'll renovate those units, and so it doesn't end up being that big of an issue for them. And for production builders, they're just going through this stuff constantly. I mean, whether they order today or 6 months from now, it doesn't matter. They're going to be burning through it.
Even if you bought a little bit from your current pipeline and while you're waiting on the 100 days, for this other supplier, if it means people are standing around versus work,
Right.
maybe that's an option. What about, what's going to be the biggest concerns for that multifamily operator, right? And maybe address some of those or questions that you get. It's like, maybe they're still concerned about quality, which you addressed. Or maybe it's timeline, or maybe, are we going to get Connex boxes that are half full? Or are we going to, I don't know, where are we going to put these Connex boxes? How many are going to come at a time? Are they going to just sit in the parking lot? And I don't know, like, what are some of the biggest concerns that you hear, horror stories?
You can tell you're an operator because those are all the questions, right? Like, yep. So their concern is, usually it's timeline, and then, well, I guess what you're asking is quality, or I guess concerns of products. Some products carry more.
Yeah, both.
Some products carry more inherent risk than others, right? So cabinet doors, very low risk. Faucets, seems like all the builders are asking, what about the cartridges? How do we replace these cartridges? Because they're constantly fouling out. Or if there's leaks, right? What do we do with what's the warranty if there's massive leak issues? And so plumbing fixtures carry a higher level of risk than cabinets or countertops. I mean, the chances of those things going bad are very low. So you can kind of weigh it that way. And so we actually create different phases. We'll do the lowest risk ones first, because it's easier for the builders to stomach that. And then once they go through the whole process, then their confidence goes up, and then we'll do phase 2 and phase 3. Let's see. So then your next question was logistics, like, where do you store it? How do you access it? Those kinds of things. And it really comes down to their situation. We have some that have 10,000 square foot warehouse that they use to store their equipment and their supplies. And so it's actually pretty easy that we can just ship it straight to that, and they have it accessible. Sometimes that's not the case, and they have parking lot space. And so we'll rent storage containers and put them in the parking lot, so that when the stuff arrives, they just transload it, move it over into those, and now their contractors have access to that. Some people have no parking space, and that's just not an option, and they don't have a warehouse. So then we will contract with a third-party warehouse that's near them that will store it and hold it. And then as they need small portions, they can pick and pull that out of their stock, and the contractors can go and pick that up. So there's kind of 3 typical solutions that we deal with.
When should someone reach out to somebody like you? Like, what stage in the process, if we're under contract, buying a project, I assume as soon as possible is going to be your answer. But I just, like you said, 100 days. Any other timelines that they need to be aware of?
If they're doing low, like, I guess it depends if they need to see samples in hand. Say they've got this lighting package, and it's got to be these exact lights, and they need to see them and touch them before they feel confident placing an order. That process of us communicating with the factory what it is, having the factory make that sample and get it to us, will take 3 to 5 weeks. If they can look at a picture in a catalog and say, ooh, that light looks good, and I feel confident that the quality is going to be fine, and we can place that order, well, then that process can take 2 days. So there's kind of a window there, depending on what it'll take for people to feel comfortable making.
Sure. I was just trying to think through, any other objections that you get from operators? I just want to ask you, because I'm sure you hear it all the time, that you can just address as somebody's thinking about, okay, if this guy could save me that much, I mean, we're talking big numbers, right? If we're remodeling 100, 200 units at a time, that could really make or break a deal in a massive way. And I could see, okay, Nate, if we can get that kind of savings, man, maybe we can make this deal work, where if we have to go this other route, we can't, right? And that's a lot to rely, right, on you to provide that savings, so I could see some concern there. Maybe how do you address that?
So what we would do is we would recommend doing a small order, like a test order, so that your whole deal is not hinging on this until you can have a good experience with it. And then your confidence will go up. And on the future deal, maybe you'll do 40% of the volume, and then it'll be 100%. And it can stair step that way. Another way to do it is to talk to past clients and just see what their experience was like. Yeah. And then, I mean, we've imported hundreds of containers, and the consistency helps build that track record. And so anyway, there's a couple different ways to kind of give you a little more confidence, but I get where you're coming from, where this deal only pencils if we can get these savings, right? That's a big ask. So yeah, that's probably what I do, is stair step it.
Yeah, and maybe you need the deal to work, even if you can't get these savings, right? To be on the safe side. But I just mean, if you're really depending on that kind of savings, probably cutting it too close anyway. But just in case. It's major. It's major savings. Awesome.
Yeah.
Tell me, from any experience, say, investing that you have, what's your best advice for, say, passive investors right now?
Man, I haven't gone through this process completely, but I've been looking at a two trust system for liability mitigation as well as tax. And it seems like that will be a pretty massive play when you are rolling properties. It opens up an opportunity where you don't technically have to 1031 the exits. And so it takes off that time restraint where I'm sure you've done a 1031 where once it closes, that clock is ticking.
That's right.
You've got to make that next purchase within a perfect window. And sometimes a good opportunity doesn't present itself in that window. And so the structure kind of eliminates that pressure. So I know that's a little tangent to what.
What's the name of it? What's it called?
So the company is Nexus Business Advisors, but Jedediah is a friend of mine. Anyway, I was just talking with him. I've been talking with him several times over the last month or so. And so that's kind of been, as far as on the passive investment side, that's been interesting to me.
Yeah, no doubt. What are some of the most important metrics that you track? Could be personally or professionally.
For me, it is professionally, I track revenue per employee, because that shows me efficiency in our systems. And then personally, I mean, I track a lot of body metrics. I track my VO2 max and my zone 2 wattage and all that kind of stuff. And I do a lot of blood work. So anyway, just kind of all over the board.
What's the number one thing that's contributed to your success?
Probably that I don't have to have all the answers. I love the concept of who, not how. I would much rather collaborate with somebody who is an expert in that space than act like I know the answers or fumble through it till I get the answers. And that's changed over the years. When I was younger, I really wanted to be the source of all that experience and knowledge. And now I think that's changed significantly. I'd much rather collaborate with people like you and in every category. In fact, a lot of our business is built on scalable collaborations.
You can go faster that way, right? And you having to learn it all. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
How do you like to give back?
So my brother served in the military. He was an Apache pilot and did several tours. And a lot of his brothers in arms came back with a lot of struggles, right, that they didn't really know how to cope with. And a lot of them, get into some dark places. And so my brother has created a program to help them navigate that and essentially turn that trauma and turn it into triumph. And so they have a program that they help people do that with. And so we donate profits to that organization just because it's too close to home, So yeah, that's what we do.
No, I love that. And obviously that hits home with me as well. And I thank the Lord I did make it home mentally and physically, or physically and mentally. But my goodness, I know so many who I served with that did not, and so grateful for the work they're doing and your desire to contribute and help there, to say the least. Well, Nate, I'm grateful for your desire to do that, but also just helping us to think through, hey, there may be a better way to get some like massive savings here, as far as, these value add deals that many of us have been doing for a number of years, for many years, and will continue, I'm sure, that it can move the needle so much on even our returns to investors. And we can get that kind of savings, buying that many cabinets at the same time, or that many faucets, or that, all these, the flooring, all these things that are very costly. And why not? If we can manage to source it in a way that's going to help us improve the bottom line for our investors while still providing quality products, in our apartment community. So for our tenants and residents. So thank you for that. How can the listeners get in touch with you, learn more about you?
Probably the easiest way is to go to the website, just innersource.com. And then there's a couple buttons on there. It says book a call, and you can schedule a one-on-one call with me or my team. And we can just, see what project you're working on and what fits best.
Awesome. That's the end of the show. Nate, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.